Everybody, yeah. Good evening, Matthew, and welcome along to another episode of the Jedi in Exile. You can tell by my face that I'm so excited to talk about the sequel trilogy
So excited! So excited!
in this episode. The first film of the sequel trilogy, The Force Awakens, which I'm going to go on record straight away, Matthew, and say is not the worst of the sequel films.
Okay.
Um, So we're going to start with that. So yeah, tonight's episode is about Force Awakens. If you've missed our numerous other reviews of the films in the Skywalker saga, then feel free to go back and look at them. Remember to like and subscribe to the page and click the little notification bell so you never miss any of our videos ever again. So Matthew, let's get straight into it. Force Awakens, sum up what you think about it.
Okay. I'm going to go straight out there and say, not as bad as everybody says. That is going to be my initial.
Is that a glowing review? Not as bad as everyone
You know it.
else.
You know it. So of all, of all of the movies in the sequel trilogy, probably my favourite. Probably the one that I think is the best. Spoiler alert for reviews to come. It only goes downhill from here. Do you know what? I think this is an interesting one, right? So I remember all of the hype round this. I remember kind of having witnessed the prequels in the cinemas as a kid, essentially. And then the trailer for this dropping and me just being like, oh my god, we are getting Star Wars again. And the trailer was incredible. We did our reaction to that, and honestly, seeing it for the first time way back when, it was, there's the Falcon, there's TIE fighters, there's X-wings, there's, we're gonna go crazy. I feel like I don't like this as much as any of the prequel movies, and if that's my benchmark, like I got to talk around that. Potentially better than Attack of the Clones, but yeah, there's the face. That's what we're all here for.
Matthew.
I reckon we just skip over that one.
Words fail me, man.
So let's actually talk about the movie itself, right? Rather than me doing this, let's talk about the movie. So this for me was the passing of the baton to the new era of Star Wars. That's how this was set up. So it was, forget about Luke, but don't forget about Luke because we're trying to find him. But
the story's centered around that he's gone into hiding, which of course we know from the original trilogies is, that's his character, isn't it? To just go and hide, to not fight the big bad Empire.
Hey, easy. Because all I'm gonna say is it might not be in his character, but it is textbook Jedi. Because the people that he's taking his influences from, Obi-Wan's gone, I'm just gonna go chill on Tatooine for a little bit, and Yoda's gone, I'm out to take a bath.
No, I'm not having this. Obi-Wan went to protect Luke. He didn't go to just be this hermit. He turned into one. He didn't go just to be like, oh, I'm going to get away. Yoda, yeah, I'll give you that. Grandmaster of the Jedi. Most skilled Jedi for generations. He thought, fuck it, I'm out of it.
Yeah, I'm out. Me and my books, we're away. I'm just going to spend the next 700 years reading.
However, Obi-Wan, no, I'm sorry, but I resent that accusation against Obi. But yeah, no, I think I take your point that this was a fairly good introduction to a new set of films. Obviously, we know that it's set probably about 20, 30 years after, after A New Hope, we know. It's interesting because we did the trailer reaction, didn't we? And there's a lot of Finn in it. And the way that this was all set up before it came out, and the first sort of hour of the film, you almost think like Finn is the main character along with Rey. I feel like listen, I don't like the sequel films. However, I did like Finn as a character after seeing The Force Awakens, and I feel like it's a shame that throughout the sequels we didn't have a bit more of his story told. So there's a bloody handprint on his stormtrooper mask that kind of almost makes him, I suppose, for want of a better word, turn um, from being, part of the First Order to part of the New Rebellion. Um, Now, was that person who laid the bloody handprint, was it someone who was really close to him? Was it just the fact that he was in the middle of a battle?
I'm sure,
Like,
and the comment section might pick me up on this, but I'm sure in the novelization of the book it explains that it's one of his friends that dies.
was it? Okay.
Yeah.
So, which makes sense, but there is no reference to that whatsoever in the film.
No.
I feel like they really missed a trick there. They made Poe Dameron try and be Han Solo.
Mhm. Mhm.
They made him try, and he was a wannabe. And I think Poe's not a bad character, but unfortunately, when you've already had a Han Solo, you can't try and create another one.
No, no. I take your point. I take your point on that. My,
He obviously is a replica of R2D2. Like again, I
but
think the humor is very forced with them as well.
I've they took a formula and tried to reapply it, right?
Everybody
And
says that this is basically a remake of A New Hope, don't they? And you can
but
see the formula is there.
yeah, so it is. It is. However, I would say that they were kind of stuck here a little bit, right? They had a difficult job. J.J. Abrams and the team had a difficult job because with the prequels, you were filling the gap beforehand. So you couldn't take the formula of A New Hope and apply it to Phantom Menace because it wouldn't make sense, right? You're essentially building on a story that's already there. Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're introducing Obi-Wan Kenobi, but a young Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're introducing Anakin Skywalker, but a young Anakin Skywalker. So you're you're building off something that's already there. Whereas this was like a let's start again, but have some of the connections there because you don't see Han and Chewie for the first however long. You don't see Leia. You don't see Luke. So they've tried to start again, and I think it was easy for them to go, this worked before, let's do it again, but change it slightly.
Yeah, no, I agree. And don't get me wrong, the film on its own could be quite a good film, but I've said this before about the sequels in our reviews, and especially the chat we did with your dad, that when you have different directors and different people writing the scripts and they don't all seem to sit in the same room and talk about it, you get a mismatch. This film could have actually been a really good foundation for the sequels. Forget about what I think about Ray or what I think about, not exploring Finn's story. This could have been a really good foundational piece, much like A New Hope was to then have Empire and Return of the Jedi. But Last Jedi
Okay, but
then just
let's not get into that because we're here to
no,
talk
no,
about
no.
this one,
But
and
I
we'll
think
do an episode on that.
But yeah, I think the problem with the whole sequels is that they don't go into one another, and I think Force Awakens, I mean, has to play a part in that clearly because J.J. Abrams directs it, and I think he co-wrote it as well, the screenplay, so he comes up with a lot of the story. But I mean, they had to kill Han off because Harrison Ford was like, "I'm only coming back if you kill him off." He thought he should have been killed in Return of the Jedi, if not Empire, for the storyline. So they had to do that. Um, the one bright spark for me in the sequels that I think, and people are going to probably disagree with me completely on this, I think Kylo Ren is quite a good developed character because he clearly has some kind of internal struggle. The fact that he's Darth Vader's grandson obviously weighs heavily on him. I think the helmet, yeah, like I think it's good that they did the helmet comes off so you do actually see his face. You don't have to be a Sith Lord and be like really ugly or masked. Um, I think Kylo Ren is a good character. Again, we could have explored so much more throughout the whole sequels films, but in Force Awakens especially, we should have explored a bit more.
But
I
I
think the
think
whole him killing his dad, him killing Han, I think is a really, really good scene.
I
Where because there's like a kind of a double meaning to the I need to let go. I know what must be done. I don't know if I'm strong enough to do it, and Han knows what he means, and or does he? And is like, "Let me help you." And he kills him. And I think that's quite good because you almost think that, oh, he's going to turn back to the light and he's going to like go find Luke or something, kind of almost what like Vader did, turning back to the light. But you're like, wow, he's killed his dad. There's no way he's turning back.
So
So I feel like that was well done.
I actually think that that's where this was clever though, because I think that by using the old formula of A New Hope, people felt familiar, and so I expected him to turn. At that point, that's what I was expecting, because everything in me was going, that's what Star Wars is about. Like the original trilogy is about redemption. So this is gonna be, he's been set up as this bad guy. The reason that we haven't got this mad backstory about how he turned is because we don't need to know, because they've established that he's bad, but he's going to turn, so it's not actually that important that he's bad, right?
Yeah.
So I actually think that's where using the familiarity of the original trilogy, it's clever, and whether or not that was deliberate, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's very mirrored, isn't it? I think that the fact that we get the Anakin's lightsaber
Mhm,
back, the
mhm,
blue one that
mhm.
is in Maz's thing. Again, I'm sure that some of the things that I'm saying that like, oh, this should have been explored, this should have been explored, may well be explored in a TV series with Disney. Finn, John Boyega is still young enough to portray Finn.
So the thing that I really like, just while we're touching on Finn, I meant to bring it up when you were chatting about him, and I didn't find the right time to jump in, but you see the whole him turning, so him deserting and stuff. It's really interesting. So I've just finished watching fairly recently the Resistance series, and in that they kind of explore. It's based around some Resistance people. I don't want to give too much away, but through it they explore the First Order and some of the techniques that the First Order use to kind of pull people in. So obviously we don't get a proper backstory from Finn. All we get later in the series is the whole kind of that he grew up, like he was taken young and inducted into the First Order, and we see that fleshed out a little bit in some of these TV series. Now, there's one side of the argument that says that's really good, and that the movie has deliberately left doors open for them to go and flesh out. But there's people that sit on the other side of the fence and go, it shouldn't need a TV show to flesh it out. How many other successful franchises are there where they release a movie and that's all it is?
Yeah, but I feel there's always going to be gaps, and I will defend the Star Wars franchise here with Disney especially. There are going to be gaps because you're talking about you do prequels, and then you've got 20 years later, you've got the original trilogy, so there's a 20-year worth of gap that is now being obviously the Kenobi show is going to fill in some of that. You've then got a 20 to 30-year gap between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens, so of course there's going to be gaps. Something else that I thought could have been explored and in the story a bit differently was the First Order. Like, how did that come about? At the end of Return of the Jedi, you just assume that the rebels have won, the Empire is gone. Um, is it the case that there was still a rebellion? So we know from Legends that you know the Empire has fallen, Coruscant is still the galactic capital, and the rebels basically go and run the galaxy. I mean, that's the short version. Are we saying that the First Order, like the Empire, the Emperor died, but the Empire itself continued running as it was, and there was still a rebellion? Like,
So
the films
yeah.
do not explain any of that.
So no, they don't, and that's fleshed out in books, right? Because
Yeah, which I get, but there's not even a mention or anything. They could have done like a 5-minute scene where Leia is talking to Rey and explaining like this is what happened, or talking to Finn like,
but it's like, but
just there's
I
so
think
much that
I
could have been just
fleshed out. No, I get that. It's
there's so much that could have been hinted at to know that and obviously they're not going to say. we're going to do a TV series about that. We're going to do one about that. But they could have left obvious doors open for then in 5, 10 years' time, Filoni, Favreau, the gang to say, right, we're going to make
But
a
it's like,
story about
but it's like the Knights of Ren, right? We get that. We get the Knights of Ren
awesome scene, like
of that. Yeah,
where Kylo Ren is standing with them. Yeah,
yeah, and that's all we get.
yeah,
And you're like, who are these guys? What's going on?
yeah.
And then they don't feature in the movie, which is so like really strange.
They're
But
in the Last Jedi, don't they? Because when Luke's retelling the
yeah,
story
yeah,
of
yeah. But it's just
him trying to kill his nephew in his sleep because he had a bad dream.
spoiler alert. But I we're kind of we're going off on a tangent a little bit here. I liked this movie in that I felt like I remember how I felt after seeing it the first time, and after seeing it the first time, I was like, Star Wars is back. Um, the
Yeah, I think
whole
it was damned if it does and damned if it doesn't, because some people really like that it was like A New Hope and that it was, Star Wars, and some people were like, oh my God, get a new story that was just like A
but
New Hope.
but this
So I get it.
yeah, and that sums up Star Wars fans to a T, right? You're never going to please everybody because what's going to happen is by doing one thing, some people are going to absolutely love you, and by doing that same thing, other people are going to absolutely hate you.
I did read something the other day, and I'm going to mention it. And listen, I don't apply this to myself because I fucking hate the sequel trilogy. However, somebody said Star Wars is like a menu in a restaurant. There'll be some things you like and some things you dislike. Stay away from the things you dislike and just enjoy the things that you like. That's it. You don't have to order everything.
But the only
And I was
reason,
like, you know
but
what?
the only reason
That's an
we're
apt way of putting it.
yeah, and the only reason that you're being forced away from that is because we're doing a review series about all the movies, so you're having to talk
I,
about them.
I just keep filling up on the prequels.
Exactly. Get that prequel garlic bread in you, the little
Yeah.
appetizers. No, but I really like. So for me, it's like this. I'm sure this scene featured in one of the trailers before it released, but you get the whole Han and Chewie back on the Falcon, and he says the line "We're home," and to
Yeah.
me, it was like absolute goosebumps. Like we are back, the Star Wars that we all know and love is here, and we're about and the exciting thing at this point was this is the first in a trilogy, so it's like, oh my god, if this is how we are for the first movie, just imagine what they're going to do with it. I think
Yeah, and I love the speech he makes about the it's true, all of it. The
so.
Jedi, like just everything.
There were really good things. Obviously, we got Leia back, didn't we? Got Carrie Fisher back as Leia with some weird.
Like the stress because Luke's gone away, she's like trying to hold it all together while her son's turned to the dark side. So
Yeah,
she feels guilt about that. I think Carrie Fisher actually plays the Leia role really good. This is where I can imagine her being as miserable as she is because of the stress she's under of trying to run another rebellion. She's basically estranged from her husband, and her son's turned to the dark side. I get that she would be how she is, and
she
it's
got
the
nothing
complete
going for her,
opposite to
right?
that.
She got
Yeah,
nothing
but
going for her.
no, exactly. And this is where my feelings on how Leia is portrayed in the sequels to how Luke is are at polar opposite ends of the spectrum. Because I get with everything that Leia's been through, she would be like that. I don't get it with Luke, but I'll save it for the Last Jedi review.
Good answer.
But no, I think that Carrie Fisher played it really well. Obviously, the character that we really probably need to talk about in a bit more detail that we've held off is Rey, who is obviously the main character in the sequel trilogy. So she's this scavenger girl um, on Jakku. So we don't really know a lot about her. We know that her parents left her on the planet and said they were coming back, so she holds out this kind of hope. Now, straight away, you're thinking, who is she related to? She's got an English accent in the film. Finn, who's played by John Boyega, who is British, London born, he puts on an American accent. So straight away, people were like, "Oh my god, it's Obi-Wan's daughter. It's Obi-Wan's granddaughter. Like, there's some connection there. The English." Um, and as the film progresses, we realise that she's force sensitive. Um, she becomes just such a leading, well, a leading role of the film. Like I say, the first hour, you assume it's Finn. but it turns into Rey. I don't know what to think of Rey as a character, because I don't like her as she goes on. In this film, do not think she's a bad character.
So
I've in this film, and I know this is a review of this film. In this film, she's a fairly good character that I think they build on the wrong way
So
later on.
this is exactly what I'm going to say. Is I think going forward on these reviews, we need to look at this as when we're talking about characters, like there is a difference between bad characters and bad movies, and there's also a difference between bad characters and bad writing. So I agree with you. I actually think that
I
she
don't think this has anything to do with Daisy Ridley and the way she portrayed Ray.
no
I
no no
feel
no
like it's
but no
the
but what I'm
story
saying
that's been written for Ray.
but I think in this movie I came out of this really excited about her character because it's like, oh, there's this question mark. Is she gonna be related to some previous Jedi? Is she a random, just force sensitive person? Kind of what's going on? Um, and obviously, again, when we talk about the mirroring, very much mirrored Luke and Anakin. Desert planet, kind of not a lot going for her in the way of life and
Yeah,
all of that kind
basically,
of
she
stuff.
wasn't actually enslaved, but she was, kind of fighting for her life constantly.
Yeah. Um. So
And you see the scrap of the obviously the Star Destroyer. That was pretty impressive. That she's constantly like ransacking this Imperial Star Destroyer. So you're thinking, was there a big battle here?
which obviously we know there was, but at the time we didn't. Um, so I actually really like her character, particularly in this movie. I think that she comes across really well, and they built a really, like we talked about. This is why I like the Force Awakens as a movie, and it's my favorite of the sequel trilogy. It's because they actually set up a really good foundation to build from for the trilogy.
Yeah, I think it gets
It's
probably a
just
bit
been
more
let
hate because
down.
of how it all went.
Yeah, it's been let down by what happened afterwards. But what happened within this movie was quite good. I think we need to talk about. We mention it pretty much every time we talk about any of these movies. They went back to the traditional formula of let's give them a great droid. Let's give them a charismatic droid
Yeah, one
to
that's going to sell loads of toys.
exactly. And do you
And
know
this is
what?
where I thought the humor was quite forced.
It was, but again, BB-8, cool design for a character. It became the R2 re- replacement for this movie because R2 obviously was otherwise, yeah. So this was good. I liked BB-8 being introduced as a character. Um, but like you said, I think some of the humor was forced. Like obviously the screenshot there is of him giving it the thumbs up, which I'll admit I laughed at, and I laugh pretty much every time I see it. But there are bits where it's forced. I don't know if you've ever seen some of the behind the scenes footage of how they did some of this stuff, but it is absolutely hilarious. So on the bit in Jakku when it's getting bombed and they're running away from the First Order, they had loads of different ways because obviously the practicality of the way that BB-8 works, where the head is like separate from the body but still stays on top. They had a bunch of different models made up of different ways that they could use him in different scenes. And one of the models is essentially BB-8 with green screen handles out the back of him. So he's like a wheelbarrow. And they use that in the scene, and they've got a guy in a green morph suit just sprinting around the sand, like pushing him around. If anybody hasn't seen it, go watch some of the behind the scenes stuff. It's absolutely hilarious. But I really liked this as a character, and it allowed, like, he's quite emotive as a character. R2, you pretty much just got the beeps, right? And that's a limitation of the technology and all of that kind of
Yeah, there's a
stuff.
bit more with two BB-8, isn't there? There is a bit more technology behind him. Um, I also always wondered, and I still wonder it kind of now. I want to know a bit more, and I'm sure you're going to say novelization or whatever. The old man at the start, who Kylo chops down. Um,
Law Senteca,
I don't know.
the old guy that's like that says I remember where you, or like I know where you came from, or I know your story, or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah,
Lord
yeah, yeah.
Santeca.
Yeah, so that because that was quite a cool scene. We know that Prince William and Prince Harry were stormtroopers in that scene as well. I feel like Daniel Craig was a stormtrooper
He
in that
was.
scene as
So
well.
no, not in that scene. So when you can hear
Is
it
it when Ray's being
when she
interrogated?
does the mind trick, the Jedi mind
Yeah,
trick.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that actually really nicely brings me on to something here. So
Welcome.
yeah, thank you. Great segue. Um, my one, and this is a criticism all the way through the sequel trilogy, right? Is how strong Rey is with no training.
Yeah, that's one of the worst bits. I wasn't going to mention it in this one because she doesn't really use the Force a lot.
So this is what I was gonna say. In this one, I think they got it right. So they've established well, on the most part they got it right. They've established that she's good at combat with like melee combat, like with a stick or whatever, because she has her
She's
staff that she
probably
uses
yeah,
and all
yeah.
of
I
that
was
kind
gonna
of
say
stuff.
she's probably
So
used to fighting, isn't she?
so her being able to pick up the lightsaber and fight makes a bit of sense. Then being able to do it using like against somebody like Kylo Ren, who's obviously force sensitive. Okay, he's injured, but
Yeah,
it makes sense a little bit, right? Because like Luke uses like without much training,
yeah. But the lightsaber battles throughout the sequels are just so poor because Kylo's had training since he was a baby.
right? But at this point, he's injured. She's had some.
No,
She's had no. Just hear me out. Just hear me out.
I am
He's
going to hear you out, but you're completely wrong.
he's injured, but this isn't where I was going with it, right? So I think that is a bit of a stretch. I'm kind of this is one where I don't necessarily go fully one way or the other on the combat bit. So it is a bit of a stretch, but I don't think it's as big a stretch as people make out because there are factors that people forget about. The bit that I do have a little bit of an issue with is the Jedi mind trick bit because she's had no training. All right, she's heard stories about the Jedi, right? Because she's the one throughout the entire movie that's like, oh yeah, Han Solo, the rebellion thing, and then so she's heard those stories. But at what point are you in the middle of being interrogated, don't know that you're force sensitive, and you just go, you're gonna release me?
Try it.
Like I don't. Obviously, the
And you
force.
know what, as well, it's weird. I get with the stormtroopers that they are just average Joes that have signed up to the military. They haven't really gone under intensive training. The sound of the First Order, like they've got these kids from not birth, but close to. I feel like the First Order troopers would have stronger minds.
But depends, doesn't it? Because it depends on what you. This is where Star Wars is quite clever, right? Because the Force is never fully defined. It's just all we know is that like it flows through everything and all of that kind of stuff.
Penetrates us,
But it's like
binds the galaxy together.
what do you class as a strong mind? Because technically, you would say that these people actually are really weak minded because they get told what to do constantly. They have to think for
Following
themselves.
orders.
Exactly, but that's what I'm saying. They get told what to do constantly. So if you live your entire life being told this is what you're going to do now, this is when you're going to eat, this is when you're going to sleep, this is when you don't learn to think for yourself. So therefore, you don't have willpower, do you? You don't have like. So
No,
I
I
get
suppose
that
not.
bit. I do get that bit,
Yeah,
but I don't
I just
understand why you would try it in the first place.
yeah, that's just weird, isn't it? The
But
fact she's so powerful in it, like
gonna circle back to not a bad character. Enjoyed her in this. We're being really critical because we're doing
yeah,
a review of the movies.
she was okay in this. I would have preferred Finn being the main character, and I actually think his lightsaber battle with Kylo, he seems stronger with a saber than she does.
But and this is what I'm going back to saying about the whole.
And he's obviously had training, much like he's had more training than she has.
Well,
So I get that he
they
looks
fleshed
all right with a lightsaber.
they fleshed it out. But then this is where I'm gonna put an argument forward that's different to the argument that I said before, and that that is, or counter to the argument that I made before, and that is somebody's already told me, or like this has already come up recently because of the whole dark saber having weight to it argument. But there's something, and I'll try and find it. But there's a bit in Star Wars, maybe it's in Legends, and that's why I'm getting confused. But there's a thing in Star Wars that talks about how difficult a lightsaber is to wield because when you have a sword, obviously the blade has weight to it, so therefore the center of gravity on the sword is in the perfect, or like is in a certain place that you get used to using that to create momentum with the weapon, and then obviously with a lightsaber it is energy and therefore it doesn't have weight to it. Obviously they have said with the dark saber and things like that they've fleshed that out a little bit, but I still think that that's dark saber specific rather than all lightsabers necessarily.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And we know that Finn has used he's had some energy blade there, like is it like the kind of axe thing that he wields,
Yeah,
the
so
thing
they fleshed this out, and
which has got energy on it.
they fleshed this out because the guy that he fights, so obviously before he fights Kylo Ren, they kind of established that he's got good fighting ability because he uses the lightsaber to fight this other guy, right? The guy that he fights that calls him a traitor, and I believe that they went back and in the novelization they, because of fan reception, they gave the stormtrooper the designation TR8R to make it traitor because that's obviously what he screams. That again, that's fleshed out that that's somebody that he trained with. They actually know each other. That's not just some
Okay.
random
Yeah, makes
trooper.
sense.
But yeah, like I'm with you. They set all of this up for him to be the main character, which then felt weird. But I don't know if that was a specific choice to again get people familiar with, like, oh, this is the Star
Yeah,
Wars that we know, and then oh no, we're going off in a different direction.
it's just a real shame that they went in such a different direction in the Last Jedi with him, because again, he was set up to be a really big character, like one of the Golden Trio, and in Last Jedi, I'll save it for the Last Jedi review. But they kind of ruined him, I think, in Last Jedi, and they kind of brought it back in Rise of Skywalker because I do like him in that. Um, but yeah, they kind of ruined him with the whole finding that gambler guy, the tech guy, the hacker in Last Jedi. But no, I think in this film he's probably one of the best characters. It's set up lovely for him. And this film, yeah, I think that I feel like I need to give it a score out of 10 now,
Yeah,
which we do on
yeah.
every
That's what I was gonna
round.
say. Like let's roll it back. So we've talked about some of the positives. We've talked about some of the negatives. We've touched on some of the other sequel movies because we've done this throughout all of the reviews. Like it's really difficult to take a film on its merit when you've seen what comes before or after it. So you have to factor that in a little bit, but realistically, we've tried to stick to also what we think of just this movie as a standalone. So hit me with a score.
This movie standalone 6
Okay. Okay.
for reasons I've explained. I think that there was too little explanation of, like, you would think that if a film's been 30 years there would be some explanation of not exactly 30 years of what's happened, but there'd be some kind of explanation instead of just the fucking crawl, the crawl at the start of the film. There would be a bit more touched on. It's almost like the audience is supposed to know exactly what's happened. Yeah. So
Okay. I'd give it. I'm torn.
oh, Natalie Imbruglia.
You know it. I'm gonna give it a 7.5 because
Oh, I thought you'd give it.
I was gonna give it an 8. I feel like I can't give it an 8, but I feel like a 7's too low. So I'm gonna give it a 7.5.
Okay.
I honestly think that this was a good platform. There are things that could have been better. Right? There are definitely things that could have
Yeah,
been
with
better,
every film.
and more things that could have been better than just a few nitpicky things. There were a few fundamental issues that I had with it. Hence a couple of marks off. But I do think that this was a good platform. for the rest of the movies. What then happened after that, we'll touch on in our future reviews. But so yeah, 6 and a 7.5. So obviously not the highest scores in the world. Little spoiler alert: they're only going in one direction from here on out. But we'll save that one for next time. So thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for getting to this point in the video and for being along for the ride with us as per usual. Fingers crossed you are excited for the next ones as much as we might have spoiled the fact that we're not necessarily massive fans. Like, there are some good things to talk about, there always will be, and there are negatives to talk about. The negatives may outweigh the positives, but hey. So thank you.
I'm actually going to make a list of stuff that I want to talk about.
So thank you so much for being here and for supporting and sticking through to this part of the video. Thank you for all your support. As always, wouldn't be a video from us if we didn't ask you to drop us a cheeky little like, hit subscribe, and help us build the channel. And as always, guys, we will see you all really, really soon in the next one.
The Force be with you guys.